One night, people around me began to transform into hideous, nightmarish creatures. The first time I encountered one of these monsters, I was at my doctor's office for a routine checkup. 4 years back, I was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease. My own immune system was attacking my nervous system, causing parts of my body, especially my legs, to go numb and sometimes even paralyzed. It makes life really fun, let me tell you. Before I left the hospital, my service dog and I would always stop by to check in on a friend. My dog Tucker was more than just my helper. He was my guardian angel, a well-trained German shepherd who was always by my side. As we stepped into Clara's hospital room that night, something felt off. The air was colder, and the only light came from the flickering blue glow of the television, its volume turned down low. Clara's bed was empty. Suddenly, I heard a strange, faint siren-like sound. Wee-woo! 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 Coming from the far side of the room, stuttering and shaky like someone whistling it. The room was dim in that corner, but I could make out crumpled sheets on a bed across the way. Then I noticed a shadow moving beneath it. Tucker let out a low growl, and I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" The eerie whistling came to an abrupt stop. Something slid across the floor and bumped into my foot. It was the TV remote. Then from the darkness, a voice, one trying too hard to sound like a child's, echoed, "My apologies, my apologies." The voice stayed in that strange, creepy tone as it spoke. A hand appeared from the other side of the mattress, and then this person, if I can even call him that, crawled out from under the bed like a spider, limbs moving in an unnatural way. The shadows concealed most of him, but I caught a glimpse of his bulky frame in the outline of a hospital gown. Nervously, I asked, "It's okay. Do you know where Clara is?" The man climbed onto the bed and quickly covered himself with a blanket, muttering, "I do not want you to see me like this. Neither does Clara. Could you hand me the remote?" Tucker growled again, and I asked him once more, "Where is Clara?" He answered, "I will tell you if you give me the remote." I asked, "Then why did you slide it over if you need it?" His reply came in that disturbing, childlike tone, "I am not myself today." At that point, I was ready to turn and leave. But then the man reached out into the faint light, revealing a hand covered in raw, scarred flesh. It looked like it had been through acid or fire. Tucker barked, and I tried to calm him down. I took a hesitant step forward and extended the remote to him. Just as he reached for it, he suddenly lunged, grabbing my wrist with an iron grip, which was not too hard considering I am only 5'1" and weigh just about 120 pounds. He laughed in this twisted, giddy way and muttered, "A kiss for a dead man." Tucker barked wildly as he pulled me closer. In the darkness, I got a better look at his face, and I remember wondering if my eyesight was playing tricks. His eyes looked too sunken, his nose too big, and his entire face seemed melted, like it had been through flames. The worst part, sharp, jagged horns sprouted from his shoulders and arms, and smaller spikes jutted out around his mouth. Were those his teeth or some kind of bizarre piercings? Tucker went wild, trying to jump up on the bed to get between me and the man. I held him back, not wanting him to get hurt. I pulled as hard as I could to free myself, struggling until a couple of nurses burst into the room. 2 male nurses pried the man's grip off my arm, but he began thrashing, forcing them to restrain him. I scooped up Tucker and we backed away, shaken. One of the nurses urged, "Please leave the room, miss." I asked, "What is wrong with him?" The nurse replied, "Just go, please. You are upsetting him." I insisted, "But where is Clara?" And then she told me, "I am sorry, but Clara passed away 2 days ago." The news hit me like a punch, almost as shocking as seeing that creature of a man. Later, as Tucker and I waited outside for our ride, the sun was dipping below the horizon. I could not stop thinking about that man and Clara. It was the first time I noticed the full moon that night. It looked so big and bright, probably just because it was hanging low over the city. The image of that man stayed sharp in my mind, and Clara was gone. Just like that. Just last week, we had talked about me moving into her spare room. Clara had been more of a mother to me than my own mom ever was. It is hard finding good people in a big city after coming from a small town. I thought of the last text from my real mom. You can come home anytime you want. You are only young once. Why waste it out there? She never thought I would make it here, but I had my own dreams to chase. The Uber finally arrived and took us to my job. I worked as a cashier for the valet at a bustling hotel. Not quite the valet myself, more like the person sitting behind the counter. Kind of ironic since I watch people hustle around all day, and yet, most days, even walking was a struggle for me. It was a busy night at the W Hollywood, right on Hollywood Boulevard. Tucker lay curled up under the counter, watching over me. I enjoyed interacting with all kinds of people there. Most were friendly, though, like anywhere in Hollywood, there were some real characters. I remember a few scuffles breaking out in the driveway that night. Fights were not unusual, usually driven by oversized egos, but more than one in a night was rare. Then again, it was a Friday, and Fridays were always a bit wilder. We had this joke that Fridays were for the amateurs, and Saturdays were when the true pros showed up. After my shift, I made my way to the subway, passing by a makeshift homeless camp on the way. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw one man tumble out of a tent. Another jumped on top of him, hitting him repeatedly in the face with a shoe. Eventually, someone pulled them apart. I crossed the street to avoid the whole scene, muttering about how crazy Hollywood could get. A little further along, I felt the familiar tingling in my legs. It usually hit me like that, quick and out of nowhere. Tucker tensed up, sensing it, just as my legs started giving out. It was the usual cycle with my condition, so I did my best to ease myself to the sidewalk before my legs completely gave out. A wave of anxiety washed over me as I tried to keep calm with deep breaths. I could not help but worry, what if this time it did not go away, and I could never get back up? What if my nerves were totally shot, leaving me paralyzed for good? Tucker sat close, nudging my shoulder with his nose, but then I noticed his whimper turn into a low, uneasy growl. Not far off, someone was crouched by the entrance to a closed shop. He was surrounded by a pile of mismatched clothes, 2 backpacks, and what looked like an expensive purse. He inhaled something, his gaze fixed on me. His face was ghostly pale and looked like it was rotting away. His eyes were so deep set I could barely see any white, and his beard seemed strange, almost like seaweed, hanging damply from his chin and shifting as if it were alive. He wore a dark hoodie, giving him the appearance of some kind of unhinged Grim Reaper. He smirked at me, noticing my hesitation. He got up and said, "I got you." Tucker barked, and I felt an instinctive unease. I said, "No thanks. I am good." But he stepped closer, muttering, "Want a party? I have something for your dog too." That was enough for me. I gave Tucker a command I rarely used. "Tucker, carry!" Tucker crouched down, and I scrambled onto his back. He stood and began carrying me away. Behind us, the man cackled like a hyena, and I had the sudden urge to turn and kick him in his smug face. Tucker had only carried me like that a few times, and I am sure we looked ridiculous. We were finally waiting on the subway platform when I felt my strength return, and I was able to get back on my feet. These episodes were happening more often lately. My doctor thought it was just a rough patch with my condition. Around us, a few people sat huddled in the shadows, their faces hidden, with smoky plumes curling out from where they sat. I caught a glimpse of one woman's face, and for a split second, it looked like she had the nose and ears of Anubis, the Egyptian god of the dead. At that point, I started wondering if I was just seeing things. It had been a long day, and I was beyond exhausted. I should probably mention, I have this strange habit of seeing death in everyone. Maybe it's a side effect of constantly living with reminders that my own body's wearing out faster than most people's. Eventually, we got back to my neighborhood, Koreatown. Unfortunately, I lived on the rougher side of it. When I first moved to LA, I didn't know the area well, but K-Town had seemed perfect. The rent was manageable, plus I had easy access to the subway and a big park where Tucker could run around. The street was usually buzzing with life, but that night it was eerily quiet. You would never have guessed there were about 10 different gangs in the area, 2 of which were the most notorious in the city. Even the old abandoned apartment building next door was quiet. One of the gangs had taken it over and used it for wild parties. They called places like that bandos. It always gave me a bad vibe, but thankfully I never had to walk too close. Tucker and I headed into our building and took the elevator up to the 5th floor, where I rented a room. The apartment belonged to Jen, an exotic dancer. Most nights I had the place to myself, but whenever she was around, Jen was usually in rough shape. I had been planning to tell her that I'd be moving out soon since Claire and I had talked about me moving into her place once she got out of the hospital. I trusted Jen, but not her crowd of party friends. I kept my wallet hidden as a precaution. Since we lived on the top floor, we even had access to a tiny attic. The trap door to it was in my closet. To stash my valuables, I had to push a chest over, climb onto a step stool, and then slide the attic door open. It was a whole operation, but it felt safe. Once I finished stowing away my things, I was exhausted and crashed on my bed, Tucker by my side. I was jolted awake sometime later by the sound of sirens in the distance. Shouts, screams, and rapid gunfire echoed from the street. Tucker whined, his eyes fixed on my bedroom door. Heavy footsteps thudded on the other side. I sat up, straining to hear. "Jen, is that you?" No response. Tucker growled low in his throat. I called again. "Jen?" Thud, thud, thud. The steps moved back and forth outside my door. My pulse quickened as I glanced at the window, weighing my options. Sirens and gunshots continued outside as the doorknob gave a slight rattle. Tucker barked, and I hissed, "Quit messing around." The door was locked, but then I heard a soft scratching, like someone dragging their nails across the wood. I shouted, "I have a gun and a killer dog. Get out of here!" In reality, I didn't have a gun, but I was wishing I did. Suddenly, something rammed the door. Again and again. Tucker leaped to his feet, barking fiercely. My guardian angel. The pounding stopped. Then I heard whispers, multiple voices giggling softly. Panicking, I wedged my desk chair under the doorknob to reinforce it, then picked up my phone and dialed 911. I got a recorded message saying there were high call volumes and to hold for assistance. At that point, I screamed as loud as I could, hoping someone in the building would hear me. Tucker barked wildly, "Help! Somebody, please help me!" Surely one of my neighbors would hear. I hurried to put my shoes on, and the laughter outside grew louder. Several voices were whispering too. A girl's voice piped up, "We're just messing around. We're looking for Jen. We want a party. Where is she?" I shouted back, "How did you get in?" She answered, "We're friends. Where is she?" I tried to stay calm. "I don't know, but she's not here, so leave, please." A guy asked, "Do you know where she hides her stash?" The girl hissed, "Shut up!" Jen wasn't just a dancer. She also sold drugs on the side. I tried calling her, hoping she'd pick up. I heard shuffling outside, like people pushing each other around. "I don't know anything. What's your name? I'll tell her you came by." One of them snickered. "We're BTS." More laughter followed, then another voice muttered, "Screw this." I got Jen's voicemail, so I quickly texted her, "Emergency, call me." My eyes darted toward the attic door. The girl called out, "You got anything?" I had some painkillers, but I answered, "No, I don't use anything." Out of nowhere, she started screaming, and suddenly it sounded like wild animals tearing into each other. Growling, furniture crashing, clothes ripping. Tucker yelped. I took advantage of the chaos and quietly opened the fire escape window, but I remembered the ladder at the bottom. Tucker wouldn't make it down safely that way. Instead, I shoved the chest over to the closet, stacked the step stool on top, and tried calling 911 again. I got that same automated message. Then the fighting stopped. Bam! Something hit the door again, over and over. "Tell us where she keeps her stash." The door frame began to splinter. Tucker snarled. I lifted him up onto the chest, and then the step stool, helping him climb to the top shelf. He glanced back at me, whining. I used a selfie stick to push open the attic door. Another loud slam shook the door, the frame splintering even more. I quickly put my pain pills out on the dresser as a distraction, then climbed up onto the chest. "Go, Tucker!" Another hit cracked the door frame wider. Tucker leaped into the attic and I followed, scrambling up the stool, onto the shelf, and then used the selfie stick to flip the stool down to hide our escape route. But when I tried to climb into the attic, my body got stuck. I couldn't twist myself enough to get in. Tucker whined from above. The door burst open. They kicked the chair away from the door. I grabbed Tucker's collar, gave him a look, and he pulled, dragging me up into the attic just as they barged into the room. I pushed the lid down, leaving it slightly ajar. The closet was dark, making it difficult for them to see inside. They started searching the room. The biggest one stayed in the doorway, while another crept over to the closet and peeked inside. "Come on out and play, we don't bite," he taunted. His yellowed eyes scanned the closet but somehow missed the attic door as he backed away. One of them crawled under the bed, another checked the bathroom, and someone else leaned out the window toward the fire escape. "Where the hell did she go? She must have gone out here." They flipped on a light and started rummaging through drawers. "Oh man, look at this," one muttered, passing my pills around. One of them caught his reflection in my full-length mirror, and he reached up to touch his face. He seemed to be shaking. "I need more of these, man. I just want to forget everything." "What do you think's gonna happen?" asked another. "We're all gonna die, man." The big one snarled, "Shut up." His voice was harsh, almost inhuman. In the light, I finally got a good look at them. They were dressed like gang members, oversized t-shirts, baggy khakis, and chains. But each of them was deformed in disturbing ways. One guy had a huge square jaw, a bald head, and tattoos all over. But his skin was split in places, with bones jutting out. Fresh blood trickled from the open wounds. Another had scaly, lizard-like skin and long hair. He had a single massive eye in the middle of his forehead, like a cyclops, and his mouth stretched unnaturally wide. His neck moved with a snake-like slither. The girl was haunting. Her face looked like it had been peeled down to bare muscle. Her thin arms bristled with thorn-like spikes. The last one was the worst. He towered over the others with ram horns curling from his skull, and his face resembled a gorilla's, smeared with red, foamy blood that seeped from his eyes and mouth. One of them glanced directly at me. With the light on, he noticed the attic door in the dark closet. I froze. "Check it out," he said, and I held my breath as all four stared up at the attic. One of them climbed onto the chest. I backed up, and Tucker growled. I hushed him as I spotted a small vent in the corner with light streaming through. I heard the step stool being placed on top of the chest, and then the attic door slid open with a horrible wooden screech. A dark head poked through the opening, but I don't think it could see us. Tucker almost lunged at him, but I held him back. The figure flinched and lost his balance, falling back as his buddies laughed at him. I pulled Tucker toward the vent. Bam! 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 Bullets blasted through the attic. "Stop! Stop! I'll come down! I'll come down! I know where Jen keeps her stuff. Just don't shoot my dog." There was no way I was actually going back down. I tried to unscrew the vent cover, hoping to reach the fire escape, but the screws wouldn't budge. The gunfire stopped. I called out, "I'm coming down! Just don't hurt my dog!" One of them shouted back, "Leave him up there! Just you! Come down!" All right, I'm coming," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Quickly, I took off Tucker's collar and used his name tag as a makeshift screwdriver. It worked. I managed to get one of the screws loose. The girl called, "What are you doing up there?" "Hurry up," I shouted back. "I'm on my way." 3 screws were out, but the last one wouldn't budge. The girl's voice grew impatient. "You've got 3 seconds. 1, 2. Just as she reached 3, I yanked the vent cover off, slicing my forearm in the process. I pushed Tucker through, though he barely fit. We scrambled out onto the fire escape, and I glanced down, realizing there was no way Tucker and I could climb down that way. We'd have to pass by my own window and get to the top of the ladder that met the roof. It was our only shot. We climbed over a low wall and made our way across the rooftop. I remembered once seeing a fire escape on the backside of the building, and I also knew there was a stairwell that led to the roof, though it was usually locked. But then my nerves got the better of me, and my legs buckled. When my adrenaline kicked in too hard, my body sometimes just short-circuited like this. I collapsed to the ground, my legs refusing to move. No, I whispered, pounding my fists against my legs. Tucker nudged me with his head, worried. I tried to haul myself onto him, but I didn't have the strength. Most of it had been spent getting us out of the attic. I could hear the sound of those monsters climbing up onto the roof. Taking a few deep breaths, I focused. Tucker growled low in his throat. I thought, I can't let him down now. Gathering what strength I had left, I repeated to myself, "Come on, you got this. You got this." I grabbed onto Tucker, pointing toward where we needed to go, and he pulled, helping me forward. But I lost my grip and sank back down. Behind us, the monsters were closing in. "Where you think you're going, huh?" one of them sneered. He raised his gun, aiming at Tucker. I lunged, grabbing Tucker's collar and shouting, "Go!" Bam! Bam! Shots rang out as I twisted to shield him, feeling a searing pain flare up in my back. Tucker darted away, with me clinging to him as tight as I could. He picked up speed, racing toward a large air conditioning unit that gave us some cover. Bullets clanged against the metal. We reached the edge of the roof and I glanced down, spotting the fire escape ladder below and an attic vent on the opposite side of the building. But we had to drop at least 5 feet to reach it. Climbing up was one thing, but getting Tucker down, that was another. Tucker whined beside me and I winced, slipping slightly on the blood oozing from my side. I realized I'd been hit, shot in the back and in my side. Looking over my shoulder, I saw the monsters closing in. I grabbed Tucker's collar again. "You have to trust me, buddy." He steadied himself. I lay down, scooting to the edge, then rolled off, pulling Tucker down with me. "It's okay! I've got you!" I yelled as I swung him toward the landing below. He landed awkwardly, but on his legs, letting out a small whimper before looking back up at me. Now it was my turn. My strength was nearly gone. Gunshots, sirens, and shouting filled the air around me. Smoke rose from the rooftops in the distance. What is going on, I wondered, the world seeming to turn upside down. The monsters were almost on me. "Where you running off to? We just want to play," one of them taunted. I pushed my legs over the edge, trying to swing down to Tucker, but I misjudged the drop. My momentum carried me forward, launching me past the fire escape, hanging over the sidewalk below, 6 stories down. Then Tucker jumped and pushed against me, and I barely managed to grab the railing, crashing down onto the fire escape next to him. The pain was blinding. I must have broken a rib or two, but somehow I got to my feet and we staggered down the steps. I banged on the first window we passed, yelling, "Please, someone help me!" The apartment was dark and no one answered. We moved down to the next window. I pounded on it again, yelling over and over. Through the glass, I could make out the outline of a woman standing there motionless. My heart pounded. Was she another one of those things? "Please," I begged. "They're trying to kill us." She replied sharply, "Go away." "Please," I pleaded. 4 of them broke into my place. I live on the other side of the building. I climbed over. They're there. I pointed up at the monsters now clambering over the rooftop edge, their eyes fixated on us. A man joined the woman at the window. She turned to him saying, "Tell them to leave us alone." The monsters dropped down to the fire escape landing just above us. I turned back to the couple, dropping to my knees. "Please, I'm begging you. Just let us in. We won't hurt you. Please, they're going to kill my dog." They stared down at me, then finally the man sighed, stepping forward and opening the window. The monsters charged down the fire escape, snarling as they came. The man pulled out a shotgun, motioning us in with a firm wave and a thick Spanish accent. "Inside! Get in!" Just then, 3 monsters leaped down, spreading out. 2 balanced on the railings. The third stood solidly on the landing. All of them were armed with handguns, while the largest of the group remained looming up on the rooftop. One of them sneered, "Hey man, stay out of this. Doesn't concern you." Ignoring them, the man fired. The deafening boom made Tucker yelp, and the monsters scrambled, one bolting up the fire escape while the other ducked down. But the blast hit its target, and one monster crumpled, slumping to the ground. The others glanced back but left him there, barely giving him a second look. Up on the roof, the big one glared at us with cold fury. Both the woman and her teenage daughter raised AR-15 rifles, each one leveled right at him. The wounded creature writhed on the ground in agony. I recognized him. He was the one I'd seen in my mirror. I stared, unable to look away from his twisted form. His face was half melted, exposing a stark white skull beneath rotting flesh. Blood-drenched spikes jutted out all over his body, yet his eyes, disturbingly, were still alive and locked onto me. The man's expression mirrored my horror. The monster let out a strained, gurgling cry. "Help me! Help me! I don't understand what's happening." But just as he seemed to beg, he lunged. Boom! The man's second shot tore into him, ending his suffering instantly. The large monster observed from the rooftop. The women remained steady, rifles trained and ready. Without a word, the monster retreated into the shadows above. I felt a tug on my arm. Turning, I saw a teenage boy who motioned for us to follow. He pulled us inside, Tucker and me. The others followed quickly, and the man slammed the window shut behind us. The family watched us cautiously as we stood there, their faces lit by candlelight scattered around the room. They were a Cuban family, all four of them with dark, curly hair and a solid build that hinted at both strength and resilience. They wore pajamas but held their firearms like they meant business. I managed to stammer out, "Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm in 5A. They broke into my place and..." The woman cut me off. "Do you even know what's going on out there?" I shook my head, feeling foolish. She explained, "It's all over the city. There's no help coming. Nobody knows what's causing it." The man muttered something in Spanish, his tone urgent as he seemed to argue with her. She motioned for me to follow her into the bathroom, explaining she was a nurse. The bullet had gone clean through my side without hitting any organs, she told me, calling me lucky as she bandaged up the wound. Meanwhile, the others gave Tucker a bowl of water, and I collapsed onto the sofa, pulling out my phone. The living room was filled with an odd sight. Teddy bears, dozens of them, maybe 100. My phone had no messages, so I scrolled through YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, hoping to find answers. People on the street spoke into their cameras, some looking terrified, others strangely thrilled. One guy said, "It's insane out here. People are losing it, fighting everywhere." Another voice warned, "It's like people are turning into monsters. If you see one, just run." A nerdy type blamed it on the moon, saying, "This is the closest the moon has ever been to Earth. No one's talking about how a huge solar flare shifted it, but the moon affects emotions. We all know that." Theories were everywhere. Someone suggested, maybe it's happening to bad people only. They're turning into whatever they are inside. Another chimed in, "If you hurt someone, you become one of them." Their friend nodded. "True. Happened to my brother." As I watched more videos, the sounds of chaos outside grew louder, a brutal surge of violence. Gunshots crackled like firecrackers. Voices screamed, cars screeched, glass shattered. I hurried over to the window to see gangsters flooding the streets, engaged in an all-out brawl. The family's two kids were watching too, wide-eyed. Suddenly, a piercing scream came from the kitchen. We all rushed over, finding the man slumped at the table looking deathly ill. His skin was dry, cracked and ghostly pale, his eyes hollowed and dark, his gums turning black. He was changing, transforming into something beyond recognition. The woman cried, "No, no, this can't be real." The kids hugged him, but he weakly pushed them away, muttering a single word, "Peligro." At that moment, a furious pounding erupted on the front door. A voice, guttural and distorted, shouted, "Open up, damn it! You killed my brother! You're dead!" We all stared at the front door as the pounding continued, echoing through the room. The man collapsed onto the floor, convulsing uncontrollably. Tucker barked, a high, panicked yelp that made me grip the shotgun tighter. The woman and her kids clung to their guns, expressions frozen in fear and defiance. She glanced at me, then at the man's shotgun lying nearby. I followed her gaze, but every fiber in me recoiled from the thought of picking it up. The fire escape rattled with the sound of footsteps, the clanging coming from above and below. They were closing in on us from all sides. Reluctantly, I reached for the shotgun, but stopped as something clicked in my mind. The videos, the theories people were sharing online about people turning into monsters if they attacked or harmed others. And then, right in front of us, was proof. The man himself was changing, piece by piece, after he'd killed one of those creatures. I set the shotgun down, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think, if you attack them, you become one of them." The woman's eyes widened as she took in my words. We both looked at the man. He was nearly unrecognizable. His brow was swollen and monstrous, his nose half missing, with grotesque tusks jutting out of his jaw. He looked up at the woman, managing a broken, sorrowful, "Lo siento, mi amor." Tears filled her eyes, a mix of horror and heartbreak. In that suspended moment, the door finally splintered, bursting open as a swarm of monsters flooded in. Without hesitation, the man grabbed his shotgun and fired at them. The woman cried out, "We fight with him!" She and the kids opened fire, unloading on the creatures as they poured in. Behind me, the fire escape window shattered and more monsters scrambled in, only to be met with a hail of bullets from the daughter and son. Tucker and I dropped to the floor, crawling under the dining table as shots echoed over our heads, splintering furniture and sending teddy bear fluff drifting through the air like snowflakes. Then I heard a low, guttural growl, a sound that churned my stomach. A monstrous dog slinked into the room, its massive frame covered in spikes and jagged fangs protruding from its maw. It fixed its gaze on Tucker and me, its eyes wild and full of rage. "Go, Tucker! Crawl!" I urged, shimmying backwards under the table. We crab-crawled our way toward the hallway, barely avoiding stray bullets as the family fought off the monsters. Finally, we reached a door. I pulled Tucker inside, slamming it shut just as the demonic hound lunged at us. Inside the small, windowless bathroom, I locked the door, my chest heaving as I hugged Tucker, feeling his small body tremble in my arms. He let out a soft whine, his frustration clear. I stroked his fur, whispering reassurances I wasn't sure I believed. "We're okay, buddy. We're okay. We'll make it." The beast outside kept hammering the door, scratching and snarling in a frenzy. The sounds of gunfire in the other room grew fainter. I knew the family couldn't hold out much longer. Desperate, I racked my brain for a plan. Spotting a towel rack high above the sink, I had an idea. I lifted Tucker onto the sink, climbing up beside him. Draping a towel over a nail, I created a curtain around us, a trick I'd used on Tucker before to play hide and seek. Standing on my knees, I pressed us both tight against the wall, hoping it would be enough to fool the creature's senses. The door was on the verge of giving way. With a steadying breath, I reached over, unlocked it, and nudged it open. The beast burst in, snarling as it searched for us. Before it could turn around, I pushed Tucker off the sink and slipped out after him, slamming the door shut behind us. "Tucker, go! Get to my room!" I whispered urgently. He led the way, guiding me down the hall to a bedroom, even as the battle outside continued to rage. Just as we reached the room, I heard a blood-curdling scream, then silence. I had no choice now. We scrambled onto the fire escape, navigating over the bodies of fallen creatures. But just as we started down, that terrifying growl echoed from behind us. The monster dog had escaped the bathroom and was closing in, faster than ever. Ahead, I noticed a line of tall pine trees, their branches just within reach. I knew it was risky, but there was no other way. I looked at Tucker, my heart pounding. "Now, Tucker, jump!" Without hesitation, he leaped over the railing, and I followed, vaulting myself over the edge. We hit the branches hard, bouncing down the pine's springy limbs, catching brief glimpses of the ground below, before finally landing. Stunned and bruised, I looked up and saw the beast glaring down from the fire escape above, barking furiously, but it wouldn't follow. Even that monster knew our jump was crazy. Tucker limped over to me, licking my face as if to say, "We're okay." Relief surged through me. I didn't know how badly I was hurt, but we were alive. The property we'd landed on was the abandoned house I'd mentioned before. We crawled toward it, pressing ourselves into the shadows for cover. Up on the fire escape, the hulking monster with ram-like horns came out, scanning the yard. He shouted into the night, "I'll find you, coward!" and then went back inside, with his monstrous dog at his side. It wasn't safe here, but we had no choice. I coaxed Tucker toward the back door of the house. Inside, the hallway stretched out, dark and decayed, smelling of damp and mold. We limped through an open archway, down a short flight of stairs and into a basement laundry room. I shut the door behind us, quickly wedging a chair under the knob, then pushing a heavy dryer up against it. I strained, muscles burning, but finally managed to shove a washer behind it, with a table as added support. It wasn't foolproof, but it was the best I could do. Exhausted, I collapsed into an old rocking chair, pulling Tucker onto my lap. We swayed back and forth in the dark, the gentle motion somehow soothing as my guilt settled in like a weight on my chest. That family, they'd fought for me, and now they were gone. It felt like my fault they'd died. In the silence, the chair creaked softly as we rocked, swaying with each breath, each beat of my heart. Back and forth, we waited, hoping that maybe, just maybe, the monsters wouldn't find us.